This has got to be one of the most narrow side yards I've ever seen on a new build. That is super tight. Side yards in general tend to be really shady, so you can't grow anything, but also with that shade comes that moisture that you get down here just doesn't evaporate. So we're just gonna do a utilitarian gravel path. We'll dress it up with some stepstones, but this is a great project for all the people who say, oh, you don't do small jobs. Oh, look at this. It's a small job and we're doing it. So we're doing lawn here. I might show you how I measure these quantities, but I'll show you what grass we use, how we prepare for it, and how we install sod lawns. There are two main grass types that we use here in the Pacific Northwest. So that's a perennial ryegrass and a tall rhizomatous fescue sod, and that's what we'll be using here today. What we like about the fescue is it's more drought tolerant and slightly more shade tolerant, so that'll do great in this backyard. But take the shade tolerance with a grain of salt. All grass will struggle in deep shade, and you may find it's just not worth the fight. So something to note about the tall fescue is because it's a taller turf type, you can mow a little taller, and in general the more grass blade you leave, the more roots it'll have to match that. So that's partly what gives it its drought tolerance. Fescue is a clumping grass type, so some of those really bumpy lawns you've seen, it's because it was a mix of rye and fescue, and the fescue survived the drought and would create these little tussock lumps, and that's where you'd see a bumpy lawn. So here we're starting with an all fescue lawn, so it'll be a matched grass type, so you won't get as much of that bumpiness, and the rhizomatous tall fescue fills in a little bit better than a standard fescue because of its ability to grow from the root zone out. I'll show you here today how you prep for new sod, but in general you want to get rid of any contaminants underground. So this woody mulch wouldn't be a great thing under your grass. You'd notice lack of nitrogen if you let it grow over this woody bark. So we'll clear this off to a subsoil, and then we're going to add a three-way blended soil. So this is a screened loam that's gotten all the rocks and weeds out. It's got compost in it and it's got sand in it, and those three things combined help to combat this clay soil that you find around Portland, especially in the southeast of town. So with sand, compost, and loam, that'll give a great base for your sod. The compost will give you some micronutrients that your grass will need. The loam is good structure, and the sand helps with drainage. So that's a great base for the lawn, and we roller compact it so it's firm, about 2 inches. If you go too much farther, you could, if the compost is still active, it might go anaerobic, so about 2 inches is right. It gives the roots of the grass a great place to start. It gives you enough to work with to level out and rake flat. So that's how we prep for our tall fescue sod lawns. Man, in landscaping and business in general, it's important to be both accurate and quick when you're doing estimates, and I'll show you one of the tools I use to do that right now. It's the Mosier. So the Mosier is a motion-based measuring device that'll give us our square foot numbers for this lawn, and we'll be able to measure a depth so we can calculate how much soil we'll need for the base of our lawn. So I'll show you right now how I measure for our landscape projects with the motion-based measuring device Mosier. It's the Mosier 2 Pro that I'm using here. So what you'll see on the screen recording that I just did here is it'll show us our area. So we're just under 500 square feet. So that's going to be a pallet of sod that we'll need at 500 square feet in case we need to make any cuts. And I order an extra 10% or so extra beyond that. If you needed to, you could see the terrain measurements of your rise and run. You can visualize that in 3D. But what I'm interested in here is this edit menu. So in your edits, you can add a depth. So we know that we'll want a couple inches of gravel. So 0.1, that would be what, an inch and some change. So that's 79 cubic feet. So I'll punch that into a calculator online to get our total yardage that we'll need for our three-way blended soil for our sod base. But that's a really handy tool to use when you want to calculate materials so you can price the job, but also with ordering, you want to be accurate and fast with that as well. And this is the tool that helps me do just that. Once you've rolled out your grass, make sure you try to stay off it, and your first mow will be in about 2 weeks. Once the roots get established, you'll notice the surge of growth. If you're gonna add fertilizer when you first put the grass down, go for a lighter fertilizer because there's not much root zone to absorb all that nitrogen. So you do risk burning it when it's freshly installed. So if you use a non-burning fertilizer like a Milorganite, that would work great, those organic based ones. And if you use a synthetic fertilizer, make sure it's a low nitrogen fertilizer so you don't burn the small roots of the new sod. After 2 or 3 weeks, it'll look like this, and you'll be ready for your first cut. If you're starting with a patchy lawn and not from scratch, you might not want to do sod. You might want to do overseeding like we're doing here. So if you throw bare seeds on the soil, they may not survive. Some birds might eat them, stuff like that. So a trick that we use is to mix it with a bit of compost or soil and then apply it to the lawn. But it's still important to cover that with some mulch if it's a large bare spot. If it's a pretty thick stand of grass, the grass itself will protect those seeds. But if you have a bare patch, make sure you add some of that soil, the seeds, and then cover it with a mulch product to protect it from drying out. Well, if you've got a large area of really patchy lawn with some bare dirt and you don't want to go through all the effort of adding soil and seeds and mulch, look into hydro seeding. So they basically coat the seeds in that mulch material to prevent them from drying, and they'll come and blow that in from a blower truck, saving you a lot of time and effort, and it normally works really well for germination. Well, that's pretty much all the ways we use to establish a grass front or backyard at a property that we're working for. If you know any other ways, leave them down in the comments. Otherwise, I'll see you on the next video.